Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. We are so excited to have you guys here for episode 20.
Michael Jordan, baby.
23.
Michael Jordan all day. The greatest basketball player ever has been, ever will be. Doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's Michael Jordan all the way. So
I'm here for it. I was like, I'm not going to walk into a pop culture reference this time. And I have sent an email for a request for our guest for episode 25. The wheels are already turning, everybody. So listeners, be prepared, because this is one that I think when we had Jamie on for 25 or for 15, it was like, we talk about Stonemaier games, like that. Jamie is a big deal. I know, like Reed was mentioning this as a listener of, guys, you don't understand how big of a grab that was for the first one. Who we're trying to get for episode 25, guys, is one of those, I think from a name, the average listener is going to be like, I have no idea who that is. But man, if we get it, like, so influent, there are so many gamers who are going to recognize the voice and the face right off the bat. So just really, really hopeful for who we're trying to line up, trying to get you guys some real special guests.
For sure. It'd be very exciting if we can. Whoever's on, it will be special, and we're gonna have an awesome time with whoever it is. But if we get the one we're thinking about, it'll be pretty awesome.
I had the chance to travel since our last episode, and I sent pictures of, I went to a board game hobby shop in San Diego, and really, really fun. Bards in the title of the shop. But while I was there, I saw inside of the shop, Jason, they had like a bunch of pictures of the shop owner with people who had come by and visited. And there was a picture of Tom Vassell in the shop, like, cause he had come by. And I thought to myself, how cool would it be one day, Jason, if like this podcast continues to go, like we go travel and we visit a shop and people are like, yo, we got a picture with the Bards. Like, that would be crazy.
That would be cool for sure. So it could happen. You never know. It may take a while, but it could happen.
Hey, Gen Con's around the corner. We've got 365 plus days for this to continue to grow. We want to thank you guys for your support of continuing to listen to the podcast. We'll get to reviews here in a little bit. But before we dive in, Jason, what games have you been playing lately? You've been going kind of crazy.
I've been going crazy.
Digital platform.
I've been going crazy on BGA, so I'll hold off on BGA for a second because I've been playing way too many. And speaking of that, you need to take your turn because we can't quit. Because if either one of us quits, it actually gives us a negative rating or it hurts our experience points. So you need to take your turn on Patchwork. And so
that's my bad.
We get thrown on Patchwork. Anyway, so I'll tell you about one tabletop game. I have played a few tabletop games over the last couple of weeks, but one that we finally pulled out again to try out was Lost Ruins of Arnak. Lost Ruins of Arnak came out 3-4 years ago, and it came out head to head with Dune Imperium. And people, when they compare them to, they acknowledge, okay, they kind of fight each other for the space, but they're kind of different in that Dune Imperium, we talked about a few times, is a worker placement deck building game. You're using your cards to place out a worker or using your card to do stuff at the end, which could be in combat or buy more cards, right? And your cards can dictate where your workers can go. You're placing a card that has a symbol that you go somewhere. So that is Dune Imperium. Arnak, similar-ish in that it's a deck building game, but it's not a game in which you have a massive deck of 30 or 40 cards and you're going through it really fast. You don't go through necessarily a ton of cards, but you still have two workers. You only have two workers the entire game that you go to dig at sites or explore new locations. And so the cards are also dual use in that there's a symbol at the top left that dictates kind of where you can go. There's a boot, like, so you can walk there thematically, you're hiking, or there's a boat because you're boating there, or a plane. And so that dictates where you can go. And then you also have the cards that just let you do free actions. In place when the game has a little lightning bolt, I can get a free coin. I can get a free compass because compass is a resource. Any other things kind of do that. There's also a research track that you could just take actions to go along. The unique thing about Arnak is that you have only two workers you're placing, but because of the way the game is, you can take a bunch of other actions during it. So that is fun because it's kind of tight in that your worker can only go to two spots. So you got to make sure you go to the right spots you want to go to get the resources or dig at the site. But then based on the cards you have, that lets you activate a site to get more resources. Or you can always just spend the proper resources to go up this research track, which gets you more bonuses as well. It's interesting because at the top of this research track, there's all these bonus. So while you're going, you're getting like bonus compasses, you're getting bonus gems, you're getting bonus arrowheads, which are all resources in the game. But at the top, there's just straight up point bonuses. We played the game 3 times and never come close to that. So I don't know if that's even possible. And you put a bunch out. So it is a game that I wanted to. We played. It's a game I wanted to like more than I did. We've played it 3 times now, like twice, like 3 years ago. I was looking at it was 2021 was the last time we played this, and I keep hanging on to it because I'm like, surely it's better than it is, but it's not bad. It's just not hitting for me. And there are people there who love Arnok, and people are like, oh yeah, it's, that's definitely a Cole game all the way. And so we had bought the expansion like a year ago, and the expansion gives you asymmetric abilities. So theoretically, that expansion is what lets Arnok go to the next level, because now you have additional unique capabilities you can do to help get the game going faster or target what goals you want to do. Elizabeth smoked me, but it wasn't a big surprise. And I mentioned to Ryder because I wanted to play it. He's like, really? Because we played it. He remembered the game really well. So it's a long way to say that Lost Ruins of Arnok gets lots of love in the board game space. And after 3 plays, I'm like, there's a good chance I'm going to sell this thing. So like, I don't even know if I'm going to bust out the expansion because it's not bad, but I've sold like 10 games over the last month and a half because I have too many games as it is. So that's Lost Ruins of Arnok. If you go into the thematics, I'm going digging in a site and I'm going to explore the site and a monster attacks and I've got to do these things. So the thematics, if you're into theme, really all go really well together. One unique thing about it is, so when you're going through the research track, you have 2 pieces. One is a magnifying glass and one is a book. And so they both go up the same way, but the book can never go further than the magnifying glass because thematically you're researching stuff and then you're writing it down in your book. Well, the magnifying glass, as you move up each level, gives you a different bonus than the book does. So I applaud it for having as much as you can in a worker placement deck building game, some theme, but I'm not a theme guy anyway. So it's less for that for me. So, right, I'm trying to talk Ryder to play it one more time with because we haven't played it with the expansion. We'll see. It just may get sold next week, and it'll probably sell pretty fast. So,
well, I mean, it sounds super because it's super popular. I think it's something that like is cool about the fact that we run this podcast. Right, is that just because a game's super popular or it may rate really high on BGG, it's like that does not necessarily mean that you and I are both going to connect with it, or just one of us are going to connect with it. Like. The honesty helps validate the others, right?
So true. Like it is rated 28th on BGG. I just had to go look it up, and I'm like 28th. Wow! Like, and it came out in 2020, so it's 4 years old. It's in the top 30 of over 100,000 games that are rated on BGA. Right? It's top 30. But Robbie just hit the nail on the head. Sometimes games just don't hit the same way. Some people love Gloomhaven, highly rated, deep thematic game in which you're going in as a boss battler. I've realized boss battler games just aren't my way, where you're working with your partner to just do this to attack and do this attack. Almost video game adjacent, in which you're doing a boss battler. On principle, I'm not into the deep exploration of the boss battling games. It's just not my style. Whereas I like Euro games, the big thank you games. So. And I'm not necessarily big on dice games either. However, I will pivot to this. The other game I've played a ton on BGA is Space Base. I don't know if we've talked about Space Base. I know you and I have. I don't know if we have on the podcast, but essentially Space Base is a way better version of Machi Koro. And Space Base, without doubt, will be on this podcast one day. So I won't go too deep, but I'll give a little teaser. The unique thing about Space Base is a dice rolling game. I roll my dice, I get resources, and then I can buy a card. Machikoro, right? But everybody else can get resources as well. The unique thing about Space Base is we all start off with a number 1 through 12 card. We all have the same 1 through 12 on our board. And then to start the game, we get, depending on what variant you use, you get to buy one more card. The cool thing is these cards may say like, okay, the number 1 has 1 coin, but on the bottom, it has a 1 coin written upside down. So when you buy another number 1 card, that new number 1 goes in that slot, and you turn the other number 1 upside down and slide it behind it. So any card that's basically turned upside down, it still reads correctly, but it's red backed. You get those resources on other people's turns. So instead of having the blue cards in Machikoro, in which you get resources on other people's turns as well as the red, in Space Base, you're just buying more cards to replace your 5 spot or your 7 spot, and you're flipping those over and going up. But there's all kinds of cool abilities. Like if it rolls once, you put its little cube on it, and later on you can activate this cube to change the die of a roll. You could set the die beforehand. The way you win that game isn't by pure rolling, and I've realized this now by playing the game on BGA. It's much more about manipulating the board with all these cool cards, which are essentially spaceships thematically, but there's no theme to this at all. It's just, it could be anything. But Space Base on BGA, a 3-player game can play in like 15 minutes if everybody's taking their turn fast. If they're because when we do real time turns, is like, I think you have 2.5 minutes per person, but most people don't take that long on BGA. And you can even set it to automatically acknowledge if you don't get anything, and acknowledge if there's only one thing you can get on someone else's turn. So you don't, it's less clicking for you, so it just burns a lot faster. And I've played a ton of games. I think I played over 50 games of Space Base in the last 2 weeks alone. I got a little trophy the other day. So, and I've won 20 games of them. But it's one where, in the end, as much as I don't like die roll and I get frustrated, and I especially don't trust the computer, it is what it is. I don't trust the computer. I trust real die in front of me. Space Base, you have to play good strategy, but if the die don't go your way, the die don't go your way, right? It doesn't matter. In Wyrmspan, if you can't get the cards you want, no matter how good you are, you're going to be better than me with the cards you don't want, but they're still not the cards you want, right? If you get the cards that don't work together, you're probably, if you're a good player, you're still going to beat me, but you're not going to blow everybody out the way you could if you get everything the way you know you do, right? And so some games, and that's why Wyrmspan is it's a Euro game, but not a pure Euro game, because you're still relying on those cards to come out. But everything else about Wyrmspan is very Euro. Space Base is literally dice chucking with some strategy on which cards you buy. But it has to be the card that comes out in the row, because you have a level 1, level 2, and level 3 card that cost different amounts. And if the card is out, if the cards that are out only give you coins and no points, because the 3 things you can earn are coins to buy more cards, straight up points, like the card could say 3 rockets, which are points, or economy, in which you're increasing your starting amount each roll. So you could get up to the point where you're starting with 5 coins at the start of your roll. So it plays super fast. I love it. Even I acknowledge them. Sometimes I win. The die just go my way. So Space Base will be one. We'll probably play it when you come up next time, because it is a better, people who play Machikoro will even say it's a better version of Machikoro for sure, because it takes out the take that. There's one single take that card, which most people remove from the game. It has a mechanism that says if you do this, you just automatically win, as opposed to first person to get 40 points. You just automatically win. That is Space Base. It is fun on BGA. If any of y'all, by the way, we'll do this aside. If any of y'all have BGA accounts, 100%, I will play with you. Jimmy Thomas, Hunter's brother, just started his account today. He was over at the warehouse because we were talking. He came over a couple weeks ago to play, and we played Azul and something else. But when we were talking BGA, and so he created a BGA account, and so we just started a game of Azul today. But if any of y'all actually have, I know, oh my gosh, our Birdie fan member Jimmy from San Diego, who you played with, is on there. We're friends on BGA. But if anyone else is on BGA, shoot us a DM on Instagram, put in the comments below. I promise you I'll make you a friend, and then we can play some games, because I will absolutely play if I know the game. Let's be clear. It's got to be a game I know, but I'll happily play any game with you out there.
Yeah, I will go ahead and, Jason mentioned in the beginning that I've got a turn waiting for me on Patchwork. If I will partake in games, because the nice thing about BGA is that, like, you can jump in on your phone and I can have my iPad charged. I will say that BGA on an iPhone, tough, because there's so many things to click. It does it really well.
Yeah.
But like tapping on a phone can get really tough. But I will happily jump in. Patchwork, we saw how I felt about Patchwork at the end of days, based on the last episode. And I think that is also like leaning into because I just know that I'm about to get absolutely crushed in this game. And I even was looking, and I'm like, it's actually pretty neck and neck. Jason and I's Patchwork game right now. Like, we're both sitting on the same amount of buttons. But I just know it's like creeping around the corner of, I'm just going to get blown out of the water in this game. Space Base sounds really fun. And I think one thing personally that I love about dice chucking games is, as someone who is ultra competitive and I love the strategy of it, dice chucking games almost have this like feeling of I can put a little less weight on it at the end of the day. And so it brings like a fun back to it. I think that's what like Call to Adventure is so enjoyable to me, because you can modify the dice chucking element of it with getting certain runes and all that. But at the end of the day, if the runes just don't fall my way, I'm not going to win the game. And that's okay. Like, I love that freedom that comes on the other side of it. Wyrmspan, Lindsay and I ended up playing on BGA for my birthday because we both had COVID. Or she had COVID. I had not tested positive yet. So we were on opposite sides of our house. And Jason, when I tell you that I was trying to pivot the whole game, like I was moving around and I was like, oh, this will work. Okay. And then like I had one action. I got 2 birds out early that were both pink that had like when predatory actions happen. I was going to get 3 resources per predatory bird. And Lindsay put a predatory bird out first. And I was like, game on. And she hard stopped that engine. And I was just like, okay, let me pivot this way. And then every time that I pivoted, Lindsay just had this forest engine that just was cooking. And I was able to catch her in a tie solely because her one engine was just crushing. And I was just like I was treading water to try to catch her. It was wild. First game I played so many games of Wyrmspan. I literally had to text Jason, like, I learned what the tiebreaker is in that game, because I've just never seen 2 people. There's so many ways to get points. Wild experience. I mentioned that I had COVID. I was going to have multiple games ready to go. Like I was like, Lindsay, we're going to have people over. I'm going to play multiple games. I'm going to have just so many options that I could talk about on this episode. And then COVID hit, and Lindsay and I discovered a new game that we started playing, and we have played this. Honestly, I can't even tell you how many times we played it, because we have been wearing these cards out. Like I'm going to have to order card sleeves just so we don't burn through these cards, because we're playing this much with them. And it is a game that I have seen at Jason's house. He told me about. It got introduced at Gen Con last year, and I was like, it sounds interesting. I don't know. It's always been that itch off in the distance that I just haven't scratched, because I was like, I don't know. And it's called Lorcana. Disney game, Disney trading card game. Trading card games are a huge part of the hobby gaming space. What I learned is that we actually have 2 hobby game stores, Jason, in Birmingham. I didn't even realize that we had them until I started looking at Lorcana stuff, and there's 2 local Lorcana leagues that happen. And on their site. One of them is 6 minutes away from my house. Nice. Like literally was there this afternoon before coming back. So trading card games, huge part of it. Lorcana is this Disney thematic. It's made by Ravensburger, who also Villainous, which we've talked about before on the podcast. I love Villainous. Lorcana I grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When that trading card game came out. Never got into Magic because I loved the mechanics of Magic, but I felt like I was too far behind inside of the space. And to me, and my friend Ryan actually described it this way, and I think it's a perfect description. Lorcana is like the perfect blend between Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering. You're tapping resources or ink in order to play characters in ink and like draw those characters. I love that like they lean into it so much as that a card is drying on the first turn that it's played, so you can't actually use it. Super simple to get into, tons of strategic depth, and it itches all of the like the strategy aspect of things, but it's also super simple to get into. Like I am going to my parents' house this weekend. We're having a big like family gathering, and my nephew's going to be there, and he turns 9 in 2 weeks. And he loves the Pokemon trading card game, but my brother is slowly introducing him to like Disney movies and things like that. So I'm going to bring Lorcana decks to introduce him, because like the art, for those visual watchers, the art is like legit art. There's a bunch of different colors. The strategic depth of it is so cool. Loving Lorcana. Jason, have you actually played, or do you just have the decks?
No, we played it. We actually, I want to go look it up. We talked about it on episode 8. I had to go look up the Her Story episode. Me and Elizabeth had played a few rounds of it, a few matches of it, and it was. I'm not from that. We've talked about before. I'm not from that TCG world, that CCG world, all those things. I see the appeal. I see why people like it, and so I played Magic the Gathering Commander series before. So, and I see why people like it, but it was never really hit to me. It never appealed to me. I never thought I really want to learn how to play that. When Lorcana came out, the art was just amazing, and all the reviews were really great about how easy it was to play, because it was it's almost family weight, it's definitely family weight in regard to the theme. If you're a Disney fan, if you're not a Disney fan, it's much a lighter game, but it's still a fun game to get into the TCG world, because it's not as heavy on it for sure. The artwork's amazing. So I haven't played it in a while. I even just ripped some packs a couple weeks ago, because I'm in this mood that I need to. It is what it is. My kids are in college. I need money. So I'm trying to figure out ways to make money. Part of the reason I'm selling a bunch of games is because they're just sitting on my shelf not getting played. But I have a genie that one of the first, I think it was literally the first booster pack I ever ripped. I have one of the rare genies that wavers in price from $100 to $200 on eBay, sitting up there in a sleeve and in a card sleeve right now, and in the plastic sleeve, because I just need to sell it on eBay. I'm not going to go get it scored, because that costs money to get it scored, and it's not anyway. So and then I maybe a month ago I was just ripping through some packs, and I got the Aladdin rare as well. That's the same way. It goes anywhere from 125 to 250. So I have both of those rares sitting in the top of my closet, as well as a bunch of ones that are worth like $20 and $30 that are kind of those are like super rare, the ones I have. And I actually have a whole, because I bought all this Black Friday or around Christmas time, I guess. I have a whole box of booster packs from the first chapter that's not even open. So I have 12 booster packs in a sealed box that thing goes on eBay for like $200. And so I'm like, it's just sitting in my up there right now thinking, okay, but I have the sleeves. I haven't put them in I actually went all out, and I actually have the themed boxes, the card boxes, right? And I have the sleeves that go along with it. But I have my games, I went ahead and put in regular sleeves. So I already had it in clear sleeves, but also have the Disney themed sleeves as well. I just need to move them to it. So, and this one, I keep telling myself, I just need to get back out. It's easy to play. It's light to play. And the art is amazing. It's relatively thematic. If you know the characters, the things they're doing are really true to who they would be in their world. Facilier brings people back, right? It's just some cool things in there. So the thematics of it are great. Because I have a little bit of Rise of the Floodborn, but most of my stuff is first chapter, and I haven't got any of the new stuff yet. So because I just don't play it enough. But it's great. It's a fun one. It's easy to learn, easy to play. Doesn't take too long to play a match. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah,
we are it's now we've played it enough that we can have a TV show on and kind of play, and it's just like you take your turn. And you're good, because there's not a lot of reactionary things happening. So very much enjoying it.
That's one of if there's any, for the hardcore TCGers, that's actually, if there's a minor complaint about Lorcana, is pretty much that. You're taking your turn, and then you're done, and then your other person's taking your turn, because like Robbie said, there's not too many, I'm going to counter that with this, or I'm going to counter that with that. There's not too many of those, which is actually good for you to learn how to do that. So you're not having to go deep strategy. If I got to wait for you to play this, you play this, and I do this. So I actually like that about Lorcana. It's about, okay, I'm just going to play through all my stuff out, do my fun stuff. Then you could do your fun stuff, and then I enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're on set 4. I would be guessing that set 5 is going to drop with Gen Con in a couple weeks, because the set championships or whatever are happening. So I'm enjoying it enough that I literally am they just discontinued in June the digital version because it was through a third party app. But I'm really contemplating if my gaming channel is going to try to take some Lorcana direction or not. So
really
loving it so far. But I come from the TCG background. We talk about Smash Up on here. So that in-depth strategy is really enjoyable. But at the end of the day, because it's so straightforward, I can go really deep, and I don't feel like I'm going to lose Lindsay on she's just going to be annoyed when we play because it's like, oh, I know what your deck does and you don't know what my deck does, because it's not necessarily like it's just so simple to get into.
Right.
But for the deep strategy, you can really lean into it. So that is games we played. I wanted to take a quick, before we talk about reviews, this is the first time I've ever done this. And we've got a big game to talk about. We're moving deep into the episode, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there's a new game that's being advertised on Kickstarter right now, from Ivy Studios, which is the same people that make Veiled Fate, game that we've talked about before on the podcast. And Ivy Studios is called Brink. They're advertising this, Jason. I don't know in 23 episodes that I've ever said, hey, Jason, can we include this in the show notes in preparation?
Yeah.
Maybe things that, like, when we're reviewing the game or we're like talking about the episode, it's like, oh, we got to make sure we talk about this aspect of the game. But this is my first time ever putting it up there. So Brink, they're advertising it. One thing Ivy does really well is they're all about some high quality components, and they love their Kickstarter campaigns.
Yeah.
And they spend so much money advertising for their Kickstarter campaigns. Like, I feel like half the board game ads I get are from Ivy Studios. I don't know anyone else that's actually doing that much pushing. What is Marvel United? DC United is pushing a good amount. But okay, so the way they set this up, Jason, is the quote that I want to tell you about in advertising for this is they said, for lots of people, you have to choose a direction that you want to start designing your game with. We decided to go with a core mechanic. And the core mechanic we started with was auctioning. And we thought, man, people love auctioning, but how do we take auctioning to the next level? Such a long ad. But I was hooked because I was like, okay, I can see auctioning. Where else are they going to go with this? And they were like, so how do we make auctioning better? What if instead of just winning an auction, you won the auction by getting more people on your side? That's the game that we know we all want to play. That was the ad. Like, and then they just basically cut it right after that. And I thought to myself, I've got to tell Jason about this because I want to picture this. I go to sell Jason on a game. Jason, I'm bringing a game with me. Here's the hook. It's an auction game. But in order to win the auction most effectively, you have to convince the rest of the table or other people at the table to get on your side. Does that sound like a game that you want to play, Jason?
No, not at all. Not for me. Not at all. Social butterflies may love that in the talk and the negotiation with each other and the working together to form alliances and stuff. That ain't me at all. Like we talked about beforehand. I was like, all I knew about Brink is that there was some negotiation in there, and that automatically had me out because I don't want to have anything to do with negotiation. So, no, if I'd heard that, I'm like, auction. Okay, I like auction games because we talked about Raccoon Tycoon. I talked about Furnace, Nidavellir. Those are all auction games, versions of auction games, right?
Yeah.
So auction raw is a version of an auction game because you take an action during it. So auction sounds good, but the way you do it is by getting more people to come to your side. I'm like, no, half the reason we don't play Catan is because we don't trade, because I don't get into the negotiation of trading, and that's what people like about Settlers. So yeah,
I was picturing this game of Will and Hannah over at the house, Ryder's home. The five of you are playing. And I'm just witnessing this battle of Ryder having to convince you or Elizabeth, you've got to bid with me. Like you've got to join my side.
Yeah.
And all three of you just looking at each other like, no.
Ain't gonna happen, bro.
No. And then Will's just like on the side that like, I don't know what to do here. But you know what? What's beautiful about the games is I don't say that to say that I think Brink's going to be a bad game, because that is so true for somebody listening, and it's one of the best parts about board games in general.
Yeah,
I just thought it was such a bold thing to put in the ad that, like, I think lots of people are going to hear this and be like, no, I don't want to play that game. So bold choice. But what is not a bold choice is how grateful we are for the ratings you guys have passed out. Just glossing over them real fast. We have 29 reviews on Apple or podcasts, and we're at 31. So we've crossed into the 30s on Spotify. Really so grateful, y'all. I wanted to highlight MWeb7 on Apple because this is pertinent to Jason and I talking before we started recording. Oatmeal raisin is a top tier cookie. It's healthy and delicious. Peanut butter is obviously the worst. Besides that, commentary spot on. This is coming from a board game veteran. So, MWeb, we literally, like, Jason and I were like, okay, which one's third? Which one's fourth? Okay, perfect. And I was like, from a scale, I personally am not a chocolate chip guy. It's a character flaw, a red flag, whatever you want to call it for me. Beige flag, maybe. For some of you, it's a red flag. Let's just go ahead and call it what it is. But chocolate chip's lower on the scale for me. Peanut butter would be my number 2. A chocolate chip would fall as my number 4. So in the interest of us making a scale that works for Jason and I, he was willing to compromise. I compromised. And we thus built a list that was chocolate chip into peanut butter into sugar. And oatmeal raisin lovers, we love you. Sorry. It just we had to pick a cookie to go 5th.
Yep.
And like a tapioca cookie felt a little too niche. Yeah. Because there's somebody who's like talking about that and going like, here we go. So, yeah. Well, Jason, you ready to dive into this? We are 32 minutes into the episode. Let's talk about the main game. We're talking dragons. You're the dragon. It's Flamecraft time.
Let's go. Let's go. This is a game I will say. So this is a game I knew when we started Bards. I'm like, Flamecraft will be on here for sure because of the acclaim it's gotten and because of everything that we were going to talk about this episode. I knew it was going to be one that we just needed to play it together. So I'm glad we finally getting it to the episode and finally getting to talk about it. So Flamecraft is the game we're talking about today, released in 2022. Designer is Manny Vega, published by Cardboard Alchemy, which is a newer company that's been putting out some other good stuff lately. It's already, even though it's 2 years in, it's already up to 369 on Board Game Geek Top 100. Again, that's saying a lot when there's over 100,000 games on Board Game Geek to it already be 369 after 2 years. Actually, a little bit less than 2 years. 1 to 5 player game, which means it has a solo version. We've never really, one day we'll eventually talk about a solo play of a game because I don't do a lot of solo play, but there's a whole genre of players out there who do solo only games and also do the solo variants of games. I've done a number of them. Much easier on the app for those that have those than actually having to do the manual of all those things. But 1 to 5 players. The box says it plays in 60 minutes. We will talk about that later in this episode. So in Flamecraft, 1 to 5 players take on the role of Flamekeepers, gathering items, placing dragons, and casting enchantments to enhance the shops of their town. Dragons are specialized. The Flamekeepers know which shops are the best home for each of those dragons. You visit a shop to gain items and a favor from one of the dragons there. Gathered items can be used to enchant a shop, gaining reputation, the favors of all the dragons in the shop. If you're fortunate enough to attract fancy dragons, then you will have opportunity to secure even more reputation. So that's a big high level. So we'll go a little bit more deeper in kind of the play of it, and then we'll go into the discussion. So on your turn, you have 2 options. You're either going to visit a shop or you're going to enchant a shop. When you visit a shop, you're going to take your dragon, your little dragon meeple, and go to one of the 6. You start the game with 6 shops, more come out as you go. You go to there, you gain a resource because every shop has a starting resource, and as you enchant it more resources come to that. And then you can play a dragon if there's a space to play a dragon and you have the right dragon that can get played there. When you play a dragon, you often cover up a thing and get more resources. Then you can fire up a dragon. So when we fire up a dragon, you're activating the dragon's ability. 6 different dragons with 6 different abilities we'll talk about a little bit more. And then you can use the shop ability if there is one. So the 6 starter shops don't have this additional ability, but the shops you add during the game do have an ability that lets you do fun things. So that's when you visit a shop. When you enchant a shop, your other action is to go to a shop, but you're funding an enchantment that's kind of out in the middle of the board. There's 4 of them sitting out there. That basically you're turning in resources to get this card. This card will give you points. typically may give you some other things. But the unique thing about there at this point, once you enchant that shop, the card that you're fulfilling the resources now gets added to that shop. So it's another resource for later on. And every single dragon that's at that shop, which there's no more than 3, you can fire them off in any order you want. So you can do each of those dragons' ability in the order in which you want to do it. We continue to take turns until one of 2 different decks are drawn all the way down, the Fancy Dragon deck or the Artisan Dragons. Artisan Dragons are the dragons you're playing. Fancy Dragons are dragons that allow you to do real-time points during the game, or they stay private and they're in-game points. Once one of those decks is ended, everybody takes one more turn. The player with the most points wins the game. That was a quick overview of Flamecraft, and it sounds like I ran through it. It really is that lightweight. It really is that basic. The gameplay is pretty basic. So, all right, Robbie, let's go deep.
Hey, first off, dragons. I mean, find me board gamers, find me people who love the fantasy world of board games, the idea of board games, who are like, and if you're one of those people and you're listening, leave a review. I would love to know who you are. I feel like dragons are like this. You can put like a dragon in a theme and suddenly people are just way more interested. Like, oh, Wyrmspan. I'm not really into birds. Wyrmspan. Give me dragons.
Yep.
You know what? I'm kind of interested in that. That sounds fascinating to me. So I love this. It's also, dragons can often have this like scary vibe to them. I think of like House of Dragons on HBO right now. Very intense dragons. There's dragon fire, all that. These are cutesy dragons,
right,
which some people would be like, oh, well, that's not really the dragons for me. It's still dragons. Like, right, there's still iron dragons. There's like, it's really, really, the art, super fun. I love the theming of this, stands out to me in such a great way. That you're in the village. You are dragons moving around inside of the village. The wording of the actions. You can take something from the dragon park. You can another shop in the village. The theming of this game, so well done. And from a simplicity standpoint, a lot of times when there is a card-based game, it's overwhelming to a ton of people because in a Wyrmspan or a Clank, trying to think games that we've had with a bunch of cards that we've talked about where you have to somewhat Smash Up we've talked about here on the episode. You have to know what all of the cards do in order to succeed in the game. And this one has a ton of cards, but it's really only the 6 different types of dragons. That's kind of it that you need to know. So jumping in from a first play, I feel like the teach is actually relatively short. Jason, you've taught it obviously way more than I have. How do you feel about like the teach compared to the length that it takes to play this game?
I agree. The teach is actually, if people pay attention and I'll step back. The teach is very easy, but people, when they see everything, think it's more complicated than it is. So their mind, especially gamers, even non-gamers, start thinking, oh, wow, there's this really big board with these 6 different shops and all these space and all these icons. What's the same 5 icons and the same 6 dragons you're putting? They all have unique names, but there's 6 different dragons. And so the gameplay, the teach of it rather, is very easy. And the best thing about it is every game comes with the player aid. On the back of the card, it literally tells you what every dragon does, and it tells you what your turns are. So literally, when I teach this, I'm like, okay, pull out your player aid. On your turn, you can do 2 things. You can gather or you can enchant. When you gather, you do this. When you enchant, you do this. It sounds like a lot because you can do a lot, but it's the same thing. Firing up a dragon is basically doing that dragon's ability. If it's a red dragon, it can get, It can draw another dragon. If it's an iron dragon, red dragon's a meat dragon. It can place a dragon rather. If you're an iron dragon, a black dragon, you can gain 2 of 1 good from the shop or dragon location you're at. The game teach of it is very easy. The closest thing of it that's a little confusing, and not confusing, but it's the heavier side, is the fancy dragons. So fancy dragons are essentially the cards that are private goals. And even sometimes I have to look up in the rule book, which is black and white, on what this goal really means. So that if there's one thing that is the complicated, if that's even the right word, it's not really the right word, but there's one part that I can't teach every single fancy dragon. We just have a rule book that it shows it all. But the gameplay is really play worker, dragon, fire, next person. Enchantment is, worker, turn resources in, fire everybody, next person. It really is that the simple teach. I mean, to gamers is like a 10-minute teach for sure. Now gamers start overthinking it, so the teach may go longer because they're thinking they want to ask strategy questions. No. Okay, let's just play to have fun. And this is all it does, right? It's actually as simple as you think it is to play the game. Now, because there's so many dragons, there's so many different fire abilities. If you want to minimize your actions to maximize your outcome, that gets super crunchy. But the teach and the play, super easy and super lightweight. And you hit it well in that these dragons, they're not the mean, vicious, evil dragons, which are fun sometimes, but that's okay. Like I love How to Train Your Dragon, one of my favorite movie series ever. Like I still tear up when I listen to the How to Train Your Dragon soundtrack, for crying out loud, and I'll tear up during certain parts because I love that series so much. And those are dragons that are, while they're big, they're not vicious, mean dragons. They're more like Wyrmspan type dragons and more like Flamecraft type dragons for sure. So the teach is easy, and the rules are very clear as well. Along those same lines, the reason why that teach is easy is because I'm showing you things that everything you get to do is good and it's fun and it's easy. Every action you take is getting you something. Like the resources are plentiful in this game. So play this here. Oh, get these 3 resources. Play this here. Fire this dragon. Get to do this. Play this here. Get to do this. So there's rarely, if ever, a time in Flamecraft you're going to take a turn that's like, oh, I'm taking this to get one resource. I'm going to the wetlands to get that one card in Wyrmspan because I don't have a card right now. Going to the freaking grasslands or the whatever the green one is to get a resource because I got to have that one resource, right? You never have a turn like that in Flamecraft. Pretty much everywhere you go is getting you a lot of stuff. So you always feel like you're actively involved in that. And for a game that's such simple gameplay, it rewards you for such simple gameplay actions that you get all these things. So much so that your limit of the resources is 7 per resource. So you could have like 20 to 30 resources sitting in front of you because there's, I think, 6 different resources. So like you can have up to 7 of each. And there are times we have just a stack of stuff in front of you, and that's just fun, right? Getting to do something that gives you things is just fun.
Yeah. When you first look at the board, I think as someone who like had it taught and is a gamer, one of the questions that we've talked about on the podcast before that I always ask is like, what's a winning score? Because one of the reasons is I try to, from the get-go, plan, okay, here's how you can acquire points. Here's how you can acquire points. Bang, bang, bang. What's the road to get those 53 points, to get those 217 points, whatever it may be, so that I can weigh my actions accordingly. And one thing this game does really well is that, like, when you're looking at that, the costs of so many things, like one of the big things is the enchantments. The enchantments are huge for succeeding in this game. And when you're looking at the cost of the enchantments, there are some enchantments where it's like you're just going to get some resources and there's going to be a benefit. There are others where you turn in set collection. So this game teaches a lot of stuff, and I'll kind of pivot to move the discussion here in a second. But when you look at the enchantments and the major resource like the set collection, that's when, as a newer player, you're looking at and you're intimidated because you're like, how many turns is it going to take me to get 6 leaves, 3 potions, and 3 irons? Like, that's going to take forever. Whereas when you get towards the end of the game, it's like there's legitimately a turn where you could acquire like 80% of that in literally one turn. Like when we played it, I had like 3 turns in a row where I just got an enchantment. Bang, bang, bang. Because I had done exactly what Jason was saying. I looked over and it was just like, I have this army of resources sitting in front of me. And not only am I going to fire an enchantment off and use those resources, but when you fire the enchantment, you also can acquire just other resources. Like it can chain itself together really well, which we've talked about how when we want to review a game, especially for the first several episodes, we are trying to, the whole point of the podcast is for those of you newer into the hobby gaming space, or you would say that you're not that adept in the hobby gaming space, how do we introduce you to more games so that you can become more familiar with these? So we don't just want to be like, oh, well, Jason loves playing cards that do things. Robbie loves secret identity. So every other week, we're just going to bounce back and forth between Jason's going to give us a card game. I'm going to give us a secret identity game. Jason's going to give us another card. Like, we want to showcase new mechanics, which could be a mechanic like you want to go into an auction and you have to convince people to join you. We know what that would rate for me and Jason, but we haven't really talked about too much of an auction game, for instance, in this podcast so far. So an auction game probably will make it within the next 6 or 7 episodes. Like, you see that. So why did we choose Flamecraft? Because it is set collection to a degree. It's a bit of a Euro where you're moving a piece around and acquiring resources.
Yep.
It does a little bit of everything. But one thing that this game, while it introduces you to a lot of stuff, the big thing that it introduces you to is combos. So, Jason, do you want to kind of touch on like just how do you want to address like how deep combos can go in this game? If you were teaching someone combos, why would you go with this?
Yep.
How?
I can definitely talk about it. So we went over it real high level, but when you enchant a shop, as Robbie is talking about, you pay resources, you get the bonus, and then every dragon that's there, you can now fire. And by firing, it's basically activating its ability. So you could then choose the ability to gain 2 of 1 good from that shop. So now you're gaining 2 goods. You could activate it if it happened to have you're activating the 3 dragons that are there. So maybe it has an iron dragon in which you can get 2 of 1 good. So I can get 2 of a single thing. Maybe it has the crystal dragon there as well. So that's the second one I'm firing up, which gives me 3 different resources. So now I'm up to 5 resources, possibly 3 of 1. And then I can swap a dragon with another dragon in town. So swap it, get it. And it could be another crystal dragon. So now I'm getting 3 different resources. So now I'm up to 8 resources on a single one. So now my very next turn, I can go enchant another shop and do a similar thing based on the dragons that are there. Or I can do the dragon which lets me grab another dragon. So it's the combo-rificness of it is what's fun for sure. And that's where it can, for newer gamers, it's definitely teaching you how to combo those things. It's not quite a pure engine, but it's kind of like a little mini engine you're running at each of those shops. You hear us talk about engine builders. Not that engine builders are cards that sit in front of you that you're activating as you go. Wyrmspan is a perfect example, as is Wyrmspan. The worms, the dragons and birds you're putting out, depending on what they're putting out, are also an engine, and you're activating them to take those bonuses. So in that game, you're doing your own and you're building it right there. But in Flamecraft, you have multiple engines that are being built by everyone during the game. So, and everyone has access to those engines as it goes. And so each little one is you're going left to right, activating that engine, which is just super cool. Now it can slow the game down a little bit but not in a bad way, because on your turn, you're doing so much stuff, but it's all good. Oh, I'm turning resources in to get points. I'm putting that there. I'm activating this to get resources. I'm activating this to swap a dragon. I'm activating this to get more resources, or draw a dragon, or play a dragon. So your turns can get a little bit longer, but it's because you're doing a lot of really fun stuff and good stuff during that time. So that combo-rificness of it is a key element to definitely succeeding in Flamecraft. You have to be able to know how to hit that right shop, to do that right combo, to get more things, to have that kind of that domino effect going forward, the resources you have.
Yeah. And when we played, so we've talked about Ryder a lot on the podcast because he's a great human being. But like, Ryder is a min-maxer to his core. He is all about if I ever want to know how efficient an action is, I can just simply ask Ryder and he can number crunch it for me immediately, because he's just gifted that way. It's something I will never be able to do. But you have 3 gamers moving in front of him, between Elizabeth to Jason to me. Well, when you're trying to chain those combos together, and like Jason mentioned, where it's somewhat engine building, but those engines can be disrupted really fast, because if you have a potion dragon, you're going to move that potion dragon to a certain shop and it's going to swap places. Well, now I've been sitting here since Elizabeth's turn, which is 2 turns in front of me, and I've been planning out like, okay, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to go to that shop. And the other thing is, if you go to a shop that someone else is at, that's fine, but you have to pay resources to everyone else who's at that shop. So that could inhibit your turn as well, that like, oh, I'm going to go to that shop. Maybe they didn't fire dragons off in a way that changed what dragons were at that quote engine or at that shop, but they're now there. Well, you had accounted for every resource you had in your hands. So I don't know that I want to give them a resource. And if the only resource I have to give could be a resource that they really need, things like that. So it does slow you down a little bit. But what I love is oftentimes some games you play, there is so much weight to your actions the entire time. As a great example, the best players at Wyrmspan, you get 28 actions for the game. That's it. But if you want to score over 100, it's easy. You just have to average 4 points a turn. So if you can think about it that way, your 4 points on turn 3, round 1 are just as important as your 4 points round 3 or turn 3, round 4. 4 points is 4 points. So when you really get crunchy with it, it's like, oh, that's overwhelming. What Wyrmspan or what Flamecraft does really well, I think, is because it's so combo heavy, the combos build as the board fills out. So when you first open, there's only 6 shops. And based on how many people are playing, X amount of new shops are going to get added to the board, which is going to create the chaos and board expansion as things go on. Now, what's really cool about that is that you early on, you're just going to go to a shop and you're going to get like 2 or 3 resources. Bang. That's your turn. It's still going to be just as great a turn as everyone else. And then when I see here towards the end of the game, there's only 2 cards left in the enchanting deck. And I know, okay, that is like the end is imminent. Everyone is having these huge turns because every shop is filled up with dragons. So even if you haven't acquired resources correctly, you're still combo making because you're essentially using multiple dragons each turn you play. That like ramp, I think, is really excellent for newer players and makes the game so much less intimidating. Now, the hard part is if you're not a combo maker, likely your first game of Flamecraft is going to feel tough because you just cannot see those combos. If you're not a gamer, you're not used to that.
Yep.
So I could argue, well, some games you just fire it back to back. New York Zoo is a great example of a game that's really hard to conceptualize your first time you play it. But you can just turn around and run it back because that game plays super fast, especially your second time through. This is not that way. Jason, do you want to talk about game length?
Yep. It's and not in a bad way. Like I kind of, buried the lead a little bit on the game length. Without doubt, I mean, it's the best way possible. 60 minutes is a lie for all player counts. There's no way on earth, not even me playing with 4 other fast players, could we get through Flamecraft in an hour. Often games will say 30 to 90 minutes, basically implying based on the player count. For them to say 60 minutes is absolutely not true. And not in a bad way necessarily, right? If you're playing with people who are prone to AP, analysis paralysis, which means having a tough time deciding what to do because there's so many options. In Flamecraft, that's maybe a downfall of it if that's even the right turn. There's so many good things you can do that sometimes you get focused on the min-maxing. If I go here, I can do this. If I go here, I can do this. If I go here, I can do this. What about this right here? It can, and that's not a bad thing to me. To me, that's fantastic. So I always got some place to go. Wow, that's loud in there. But for folks who struggle with trying to calculate every single action, it's pretty much the only negative thing I have to say about this game. And it's not a game you would think would draw analysis paralysis. More heavy Euro games do that. But because there are so many good things you can do, people who analyze every move have so many good moves to analyze on their turn. And like Robbie said, if you're swapping dragons, where they think I'm going to go there, where they just swap that dragon, well, now I got to think about everything again. So it's I don't want that to scare anybody away, but for certain, if Robbie and I, who both know Flamecraft, play it, it's probably going to be 30 to 45 minutes, right? If we play super fast, maybe not, but if we're playing it to its full thing, it depends on if we're racing to get through the Artisan Dragons or if we're racing to get through the Fancy Dragons, right? So, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe 30 minutes we're playing really fast, but it's closer to a 40-minute game. 3 players, an hour game, 4 players, an hour and 15, hour and 20, 5 players, depending on their players. Speed is an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. I just had to do that fair warning for sure. So, because, and again, I keep saying this, there's so many good things. It's not because it's really a bad game. There's just so many good things that people that struggle to make that decision on which good thing they want to do will slow that game down for sure. So that's our biggest thing. I'll say that, like, it can be a longer game if you're playing with folks who, or maybe newer players who are intimidated by the combos. And some players, like we've been playing with, Jimmy and his wife Anna. Anna's not a hardcore gamer, but she just takes the action. Like, I play with newer gamers who are like, well, I don't know what to do. That's not Anna. Anna's like, hey, I'm just gonna go here. I'm like, fantastic. You're the type of gamer we want to bring new gamers into, because you may luck into a win. She did that with For Sale the first time they were over, right? I love the fact that when, as a newer player, she just, I'm just gonna do this action and see what happens. I'm just gonna do we've explained to her, she asked questions, but I'm just gonna do this without, okay, what do I do? Getting that stuck there because of too many good actions. If there's a downside, it's a funny thing to say. There's too many good things in this game, too many good places to go to do fun things. It will be, I'll get off my soapbox. It will be a longer, I fear for most players, it's longer than they think it'll be, because your turns can, even for fast players, your turns can take a while, because do this, got to fire this dragon. So let me grab those 3 resources. I'm going to fire this one. I'm going to move that dragon there, fire that resource. And I'm going to go here and get these 2 resources. Unless you're moving really, really fast, it just takes time to do that turn. So that capture, I mean, you've played it once, but do you think that's an accurate assessment of it, Robbie?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It, like this, and what I would say in terms of like the big turn taking a while and things like that, is that lots of games, I feel like, especially if it has more of a solo solitaire type feel, you get towards the end and it's like, if a great example, I mean, we keep talking about Wyrmspan, but it, like, if I have a great engine going in Wyrmspan, I have won so many games based off of the tuck strategy. Like, tuck game strong, here we go. Because it's especially in the European expansion, it's so overpowered. In the original, eggs are overpowered, and then they took tucking way too far in the Europe expansion. I'll just call it what it is. So if I have a good tucking engine going, it is so uninteractive to everyone else at the table, because I'm literally drawing a card, looking at it. I'm tucking one underneath. I'm drawing another card. I'm looking at it. I'm deciding what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And like, there's just all these things happening at my board, and so little is changing to what you have in front of you, because at best, I'm going to take 3 cards away that you may have been interested in. But at that point, it's not like, oh, am I interested in the new cards? It's literally just, I had no intention of drawing a card anyway, so what you're doing doesn't affect me.
Right.
In Flamecraft, while it's going to go long, those ending turns are still somewhat interactive for everybody else, because you'll have shops that, when fired or have abilities happening, that's an opportunity for everyone to go and get a resource. Everyone can go do an action. You'll have opportunities of, okay, I was going to use this shop, but they just fired a potion dragon, and now that's changed things around. I need to start formulating and working on what I'm going to do. The pieces are always moving, so it's not so much a like, what they're doing has no effect on me, and I just have to sit back and wait for my turn to occur. You can constantly be engaged because things are always moving, which is such a cool aspect to the game. And it, once again, it's a double-edged sword, because that is also, for the AP players, that's what kills them.
Right.
Is now when it comes to their turn, they're like, I didn't have time to process, because now I have to run through the details and the okay, if I go to this shop, it's going to do this. This shop's going to do this. This shop's going to do this. There's just so many options. But another thing that I think really makes this game shine is, for the price of the game, the quality of the components is insane on how high quality it is.
Yep, for sure. Like, you get in the base game, which, by the way, we're going to say that now is right now is $34 on Amazon, and it's even part of the buy 3 for the price of 2. Amazon does this deal every once in a while. Target does a deal as well. So you can buy 3 board games, and they basically get the 3rd one for free, I think, is the way it works. Essentially, you just buy 2, get 1 free. But it's on sale for $34. You get a long neoprene mat. So it's not a player board, not the traditional cardboard. It's literally a mat that you roll out. You get these cool little, actually, I gave Hannah don't know if I told you that. I gave Hannah the copy we played with. I gave her because she'd been wanting Flamecraft, so I had to get out my newer copy. But it has these amazing, and I have them in the bags, but these awesome dragon meeples, that are high quality, big. You have small little wooden pieces for your point tracker. Big cards, they're nice quality cards. Small cards, a ton of cards, small cards. Like for $34, you're right. You can't beat the production of that. I when I pulled it out, I was like, oh, I totally forgot about the neoprene mat. I mean, that mat alone, if you bought that for another game, would be like $30. If you bought a mat for a game to replace a board, is like $30 alone. So the fact that the board itself is a neoprene mat is pretty awesome. So. I will say this too, though. There is also, I'll pivot a little bit. There's a world of upgrading games that we've talked about. Flamecraft, the original Kickstarter, came with some awesome upgraded bits, and I bought 2 of those because I knew it was going to be a hit. Right? I bought 2 copies of Flamecraft, sold one without ever opening it, and it literally paid for both games because that's how high the fervor was when Flamecraft first came out. And so since then, they have released a second round of upgraded bits, which are metal coins, basically plastic minis. They're different than the first ones, but they're still minis. Wood bits for all the pieces as well, because there's 6 different resources, five resources and coins. So you also have a world of you can go buy these meeples, these dragon plastic meeples, dragon minis to upgrade, as well as the coins and the bits as well for not that much. It's not that much more expensive. It's probably the cost of the game, but if you like blinging it out, having those, it definitely makes it blinged out games are always a little nice to play with.
Yeah, it's if you're ever looking to shop for the gamer in your life, and or you love a game, let the loved ones in your life know, hey, upgrading the bits of my game is such a great way to show the gamer in your life love. If you know that, oh, here's a game that I know they don't have in their collection, great. But for lots of folks, it's like, oh, if my mother-in-law wants to buy me a game, it's tough because I basically have to send her a shopping list of here are the games I actually like so that I don't end up with another copy of Exploding Kittens. That there was a while where I had 4 different copies of the original Sushi Go, Jason, because everyone kept buying me the original Sushi Go, even though I also already had Sushi Go Party. And that's not me being like a bitter gift receiver.
Right.
Ryan got me upgraded bits for Wyrmspan. So I now have upgraded food bits and upgraded player markers, which are actual birds,
right,
instead of that's so sick. What a great present. I know ABB got you Stone Age upgraded bits. You can upgrade these bits. But it's always shocking to me, because I know Jason is an upgrader, I have to ask half the time when I play games at his house, okay, so what's base for this? Are we playing a special version? Are we playing expansions? What's going down? So this one, just even the base bits, super, super cool. Jason, if you're down, we're at an hour. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or do you want to dive into a cookie rating type vibe? What's your thought?
I think we're good. I think we
haven't hit so far.
I think we covered everything. I was going to really look at our show notes real quick. I think we covered everything as well. I got a good reference on it. I will reemphasize, and you said at the beginning, this game, and it's funny, we are doing this almost unintentionally, but a few of the games we're picking are teaching newer gamers a bunch of different things, and you kind of hit on them. It's kind of a worker placement in that you're moving your meeple to different spots to take an action. Most worker placements, you have more meeples, you can do multiple things, but on this one, it's each time you're moving it once, but that's still you're placing your worker somewhere, you're taking an action. It's a set collection because you're gathering resources to turn them in to do things. It's a engine runner, maybe not an engine builder, but you're learning how to run engines in a game, which is the combos, right? In the end, it's kind of adjacent to that. And then it's learning how to do combos together. It's learning how to run an engine that's sitting there and learning how to combo it together for the maximum result, right? So it's showing a bunch of different things in this one game that kind of gets pushed a little bit into worker placement, but it's so much more than that. And I like the fact that it shows you each of those things in its own way, an aspect of how those things go about. So yeah, I'm ready for the cookie rating. You want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I can go first this time. I feel like I've had you go first the last couple of, we try to balance it, try to go back and forth. And I'm going to start because I feel like I had to come around as the negative Nancy last time, and I will go ahead and tell you that for me, this game is going to be really high up there. I very much enjoyed this game thematically. I think that it is just a great. I think it is so fun to dive into, and something that we don't normally talk about is setting up the game, because this game is huge. It takes up a lot of, you got to have a decent sized table for this. Like if you've got your basic coffee table, probably not going to fit on it. So it takes up a lot of space, but honestly, one of the things about setting up the game that I think is fascinating is there are so many shop options that come in the original box that you don't even see all the shops. Not only do you not see all the shops because you may not get them all out, but you also won't see all the shops because there's so many for each type of dragon that every game you play, you could end up with like different shops that you end up using. And another thing that this game doesn't teach, just set collection, doesn't teach just engine running. It also is like hidden scoring goals. Because those fancy dragons, there's two different types of fancy dragons. There's ones that give you an immediate bonus during the game, and there's others that give you an in-game scoring goal. So there's so much player variability, because not only are you going to be struggling, but like this Iron Dragon shop, the game you played, it just was loaded with plant dragons. All right, cool. That's fantastic. But the next game, that Iron Dragon shop could be all Iron Dragons, and suddenly like you're just swimming in iron. So it's so interesting there. For me, I love combos. Therefore, it's a double doozy for me. Like it launches through the roof for me, because Jason talks about he loves cards that do stuff. A game that when I first started my Robbie C Gaming channel, I played a game called Marvel Snap. And my favorite thing when that game first launched was pulling off the most insane combos of cards, and the satisfaction that I get when I play a card game. And I feel like my turn lasts for like 4 hours. It doesn't, but I feel like my turn lasts for 4 hours because I'm just stringing together all of this awesome stuff. I don't care if I never win a game of Flamecraft. Because the rush that I get working towards the end of the game of like, oh man, I'm about to do something crazy here. And not in like I'm normally the disruptor. I'm normally the guy that loves to do take that action, things like that. And I'm not doing any of that in Flamecraft, but just the sheer satisfaction of pulling off I just gained 8 resources, 3 reputation, and got it. Like, it's so satisfying to me. And I would love for this audience of introducing new players to it. I think this could feel like one of the crunchiest games when you think about the back half of the game. But when you really break it down, it's so simple. I think if you're not a combo player, this could make you fall in love with combos to where you're just looking for that itch elsewhere. So it's very high up there for me.
It's so true, because it's I mean, I can do this, and then it lets me do this, and now I can do this. I mean, that's what a combo is, right? The reason we like combos is I can do this fun thing, and that lets me do one more fun thing, and now I can do another fun thing. Like, I love that. I'm on a crazy Castles of Burgundy kick in BGA, and there's tiles that you play that let you do this, and I've comboed a castle with pull a tile with it's doing those kind of combos in their own way are just fun, right? You feel so good, and getting to run through that engine, doing those combos with each of those shops is so cool. And you hit the nail on the head. Like, I had this deck out and I forgot to mention it. The replayability is so high, because even though the 6 dragons are the same, those are basically like worker placement type spots. You go to Lords of Waterdeep, the spots are always the same. It's the buildings that come out and your lords and your intrigue cards that are different. Well, in Flamecraft, the dragons are always the same, and you have the same 6 starting shops, but the other shops are all different. And you can even play a way in which, okay, I did this bread shop and this plant shop this time. I'll put them in the back, so I won't even use them next time. Shuffle through, and now you're going through all the new ones. It's a way to get through all of them and get to see what all those cards are at. The replayability is definitely high level on this. So when I come down to my score, I go back and forth. Like I'm not kidding, and we've talked privately about it. I've gone back all the way, almost every score on this. I could justify for me personally that all the top 4 scores hitting it at different times, basically. But when I talk about it and think about it, for me, if it's a 3-player game, then this is definitely, that's a terrible caveat, but I'm being totally transparent with my game style, right? If it's a 3-player game, it's definitely a chocolate chip cookie. Without doubt, I love it. It's not quite a double doozy for me, but I still, because I have so many games that I love as well. It's a chocolate chip all the way. If you add more players, it's going to quickly go downhill just because it's the time. And again, it sounds it's sounding worse than I mean it to, but there's so many good things that each player to play their turn just takes a while. So it is what it is, right? You want to do, the combos are awesome, but it just takes a while to run through that. So for me, the gameplay gets less and less the bigger the crowd. With 3 people, it's easily a chocolate chip cookie. And I'll say this too: 2-player is light. 2-player will play pretty fast, but you're so open in the town that it almost feels like you're playing a solitaire game in many ways. Because Robbie kind of hit on it earlier, that the closest thing to a negative thing truly within the game is that if you go to a shop where someone else is at, you have to give them a resource. So if you only have a 2-player game and you have 6 shops, you're just going to your own shop all the time. And when Elizabeth and I played this for Fantastic February last year, we're like, it's basically a single-player solitaire. That's not a bad thing, because guess what? I'm still doing combos. I'm still getting resources. I'm still taking those same actions. I just get to do it more often because there's only 2 of us. That is not a negative shot. Some people don't like the concept of single-player solitaire. Doesn't bother me at all, because I'm trying to play the game to do the fun stuff. Other games are built more on interaction. I mean, Dune, at the end, you're doing combat with other people. That's not what this game is. In a single player solitaire type game where I get to do a lot of fun stuff is great. Love that. And so it just means it's more wide open and less tight with people going to other shops. So I didn't mean to go off that tangent, but it hit me as well as I was talking about that. Chocolate chip cookie, if it's a 2 or 3-player game, easily a chocolate chip cookie. So I'll call it a chocolate chip cookie for me.
Dude, it's I wonder from a thinking about, I believe you call it your favorite of all time in Dinosaur Island. Is that a stretch?
I generally say that. It could probably drop between 1 to 3, but in general, when people say it, it's Dinosaur Island. So
yeah, so top 3 guaranteed. Yep. And I wonder, do you think part of why the length of this game in particular, even though the combos get so much bigger at the end, do you think it's because if you think about, I'm going to invest an hour and a half into a 4-player game, it feels more satisfying to get to the end of a Dinosaur Island game? And so, does that affect the taste of the game, do you think? Probably
so. I'd be lying if it didn't influence it in some way or not, because of all the things I've gotten to do. Whereas in Flamecraft, I've gotten to do a lot, but it's a lot of the similar stuff, just different levels of combos to get different enchantments. I think the other thing too is in every time I talk about this, I feel like I'm crashing on it. I'm not. It's just me. Is that in Dinosaur Island, and we're getting on a side tangent, the longest thing you ever do is that phase 4. We all just kind of run through and buy our stuff and do that. But other than that, you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn. Whereas in Flamecraft, if everybody's enchanting, that turn is really long, and that turn is really long, and that turn is really long. And so that's why as the game goes and you have all these resources, the game kind of drags on if you have 4 or 5 players, right? I always come back to that. If I erase 4 and 5 players, I have nothing negative, truly. Even in the game length with that, I have nothing negative to say with that. If people want to play a 4-player, I'll happily play a 4-player. Let's be clear, right? But my ideal size is 3 players because it's just enough tightness that we're all kind of combating for spots on the shops, because some shops are just better than others. So, but the point of having the journey being bigger and gotten to do more could definitely be that way with Dinosaur Island and even Grand Austria Hotel. We haven't played that with you yet, but Grand Austria Hotel is it's a similar thing in that you're doing a lot of stuff and you're taking a little adventure as you go through this game. So
Yeah, because the weight of the actions is the same from turn 1 to turn 15
Yep.
in Flamecraft, which is nice for, like I said, in the ramping to build the combos.
Yeah.
You know that no matter what the name of that red dragon is, that meat dragon is always going to let you place a dragon.
Yep.
Like, I don't care if it's on the other side of the board, if it's right next to me.
Yep.
It's always going to do that on turn 1. It's going to do that on turn 15. It's just the raw number of dragons that I'm utilizing
Yep.
on turn 15. So I think that's a totally valid, and you don't even have to feel bad about it, Jason.
Yep.
I'm confirming you in this. I think that you are completely, everything you said is true.
Well, it's so funny because
in
hindsight, like I picked on the Dice Tower a while back to review a Wyrmspan, and they all gave it an 8.5, but they feel like they complained about it the entire time. I'm like, that was the worst 8.5 review game, and 8.5 for them is like a chocolate chip cookie. Like, they literally felt like they crapped on it the entire. It was not very nice about that the entire time. Two of them, Camilla and Z. I love Z for sure. And Tom was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are just crushing it," and they gave it an 8.5. I'm like, I feel like half of me on this review is like talked about one specific thing, but I came up with a chocolate chip cookie. For $34, this is an unbelievable game. I'm not just saying that. It is for everything you get and the gameplay you get. Even if you're a heavier gamer, because of the combos you get to do, because this is a lightweight game for sure. Because the game max is that way. It's definitely a lightweight. It's heavier than entry level, not pure entry level, but it's not that midway. It's that lower, it's the higher end of lightweight. But it's a great game to teach you a bunch of those things and just have fun. And part of that, the turns taking long, you can have more the converse of that is if the turns are taking a little longer, it gives you more time to socialize as well, right? That's the thing I take for granted in games where we can just talk to each other while we play a game as opposed to just trying to head down, do the game. So it's a good game. I'm not lying with a chocolate chip cookie. It is that good.
Yeah. And like I said, we try to give the honest feedback, and it is a game that you can dive into at any time. I think that a length of the game, I'll defend you one last time. Here's the last thing we'll say about it. When it comes to newer gamers, and I am married to someone who loves to play games, but I would describe her as a midweight gamer at best. Like, getting my wife to sit down and play a Grand Austria Hotel, or getting my wife to play Dinosaur Island, probably never going to happen because it's just too thinky for her. Not because she's not intelligent. She is way smarter than me by a mile. It's just when she thinks about how she wants to invest 2 hours of her time in one singular game is really tough for her.
Yep.
And there are lots of folks out there who, when you first get into gaming, thinking about working through a 2-hour game is understandably intimidating.
Yeah.
So I think that all of this warning is not to push you off of it. I want to be on one side of it saying, I think you're going to be really satisfied on the other side of that 2-hour game. And Jason, it sounds like would say that you're going to be making some fun combos. You just need to walk in and prepared. It's going to take some time.
Yep.
So not going to be a bad time. It's just going to take some time.
Yep.
So, Jason, any final thoughts for the episode before we round it out? We're coming in at close to an hour and a half, which is it's going to be like an hour and 20.
Yeah.
This might be our longest episode yet, besides lists.
Yeah, list. I think our first list was like an hour and a half. The second one probably is. No, I think it's good. I think the discussion's good. I think, and this is going to be like a little arrogant for sure, but I think our podcast offers something that a lot of podcasts don't go deep on a specific game. They spend, and that's not wrong. They talk about a bunch of games. I listen to those because I like hearing about all those games for a few minutes at a time, which is also why we always, I emphasized to Robbie from the beginning, we need to have a games we played lately. So we can just talk about other stuff because we like talking about games and let people hear about those other games. But I think what we're doing, and if it goes a little long, if that's too long, let us know. But so far, a few folks have said, hey, a little over hour is not bad if it's getting all the information out. And it's a good thing. Even Jamie has said on his podcast that he's looking for folks who go deeper on a specific game as opposed to covering a lot of high level games, because that's just not what he's looking for. And the fact that we go deep and wide, and not even as deep as we could, because we try to keep it at 30 minutes to 40 minutes, a little bit longer this time, because we could definitely talk longer. I think the length is not a terrible thing, and I think it's because we're getting the good information out there and we're having a good energizing discussion.
Yeah, just think about if we tried to talk about deep strategy of the game, like how much longer that would take. That'd be insane if we're like, here are some core strategies that you need. Like, we talk about the features of the game. We don't even dive into this strategy is just good.
Yeah, this is true.
So, y'all, hope you enjoyed it. I enjoy. This is one of those things that Jason and I are going to spend this much time talking to each other about games and life, anyways. So you guys are just here for the ride.
Yep.
And we're grateful for you being here for the ride. It's an honor to record it. But we hope that the joy that our friendship gives each other helps bring a smile to your face every other week. So thank you for coming to the table. We will see you guys in 2 weeks for episode 24.
See you then.